Good morning, students, and welcome to the class. Students, in our last class, we discussed the biography and the literary achievements of a famous Indian English poet, Nissim Ezekiel. Students, in our today's class, we are going to begin one of his very famous poems, Background Casually. Students, this poem, Background Casually, was uh, first published in his anthology of poems, Hymns in Darkness, and it is an autobiographical poem. Students, as the title suggests, the poet, while recalling his past, assumes a detached, casual attitude. Uh, as I told you yesterday, Ezekiel's first anthology, A Time to Change, was published by the Fortune Press, London, in the year 1952, and it was hailed as herald of modernity in Indian English poetry. And Teki and Daruwala, the other famous Indian English poet, thinks that it brought for the first time a modern Indian sensibility in a modern idiom. So, students, let us first go through some stanzas that we are going to discuss today. Background casually. A poet rascal clown was born, the frightened child who would not eat or sleep, a boy of meager bone. He never learned to fly a kite, his borrowed top refused to spin. I went to Roman Catholic school, a mugging Jew among the walls. They told me I had killed the Christ. That year I won the scripture prize. A Muslim sportsman boxed my ear. I grew in terror of the strong, but undernourished Hindu lads, their presuppositions always wrong, repelled me by passivity. One noisy day I used a knife. At home on Friday nights, the prayers were said. My morals had declined. I heard of yoga and of Zen. Could I, perhaps, be a rabbi sent? The more I searched, the less I found. 22. Time to go abroad. First the decision, then a friend to pay the fare. Philosophy, poverty, and poetry. Three companions shared my basement room. The London seasons passed me by. Students, alienation can assume different forms. It can be linguistic, as we find in the case of Indian English writers using an alien language. This alienation can be social, religious, and cultural in case one is divorced from one's ethos and milieu. It can be existential when one is in disharmony with the kind of existence or mode of living one has to lead. Alienation experience, it is to be noted, is bound to produce despair. But a talented artist, poet, or writer can put it to creative use as it enables him to cultivate a detached attitude. Students, Background Casually, as I have told you, was published in Hymns in Darkness. It has got various autobiographical elements in it. When we look at the title, we find that the poet, while recalling his past, assumes a detached attitude. When we read the poem, throughout the poem, as it moves in time from present to past to present, the tone remains casual. It is perhaps the insignificance of his past that makes the poet adopt a detached stance and report in a casual tone. One cannot escape the obvious humor and banter as the poet vivifies for us his memories of what a critic calls a lifeless past. Students, we can divide this poem in 3 sections, and each section contains 5 stanzas. So we have gone through the stanzas that belong to the first section, and in this section the poet calls himself in a lighter vein a poet, rascal, clown. Students, as the lines say, he recalls his childhood days filled with a sense of fright and failure. As I told you that he was born in a Jewish family, and he felt we realize that he was a frightened and restless child, and by appearance we find Ezekiel to be very lean and thin. And he recounts his experience in the Roman Catholic school where he studied in his childhood, and we can see that unlike other normal children, he was poor at games, and he shares that he even couldn't fly a kite. He even failed to spin his top that he would borrow from his friends. Students, as he was a Jew, he had to face numerous difficulties. In a Roman Catholic school, he shares his memories that he was ill-treated both by the Christians and the Hindus that were there in his class. Some Christian boys would call him a murderer, as the Jews had killed Jesus Christ. And some of his Muslim classmates, they would beat him, sometimes they would box his ears. And he recalls that how other boys belonging to Hinduism, they were bullies, and he was greatly frightened by them. He also shares his dislike for his classmates when he calls them undernourished Hindu boys whose passivity repelled him and whose prepositions were always wrong. And students, he tells us that his parents' aspiration was that they wanted to make him a Jewish priest. Though he attended prayers, he realized that his morals had declined, so he was unfit to be a priest. So, in the first part, the first section that we discussed today, the 5 stanzas that we discussed today, we realize the agony, the alienation, the helplessness that Ezekiel must have felt as a child during his school days, when students belonged to different religions such as Islam or Christianity or Hinduism, and he was a Jew and he belonged to a minority, and he shares how he was bullied, how he was terrified, and how he reacted towards his classmate. So students, the discussion about these first five stanza comes to an end here, and we will continue with the poem in our next class. Thank you very much.